name is Marija Vlajković. I come from the University of Belgrade, but I also do my Ph.D. in France. So I do co-tutel between the University of Belgrade and University of Nancy. And while I was writing my thesis, I wanted to actually explore the notion of the constitutional identity in the first part from the perspective of member states, I would say, versus the European Union, or together with the European Union. And on the other side, I wanted to explore how does one candidate country now fits in that, I would say, a very complex constitutional picture that already exists in the European Union. And what is interesting about the Republic of Serbia is that there are a lot of interesting things, but one of the things that I will discuss today is the fact that over 2 decades we are in the EU integration process. So we started, I would say, when we started with our democratic transition in 2000s, and we are still in the process of European integrations. It's nothing new, we are not the first one. I mean, basically all of the Western Balkan countries are as well in the process of EU integration. Some are front runners, some are lagging behind, but it's what I will focus today on is how these external processes become part of a very complex internal constitutional processes. And I will focus actually on the influence of the Europeanization and the European integrations on the constitutional identity of the Republic of Serbia. So firstly, regarding the Republic of Serbia and actually Yugoslavia, something that stands out is the fact that, of course, as my colleague at the beginning said, the constitutional identity is not something that is written in stone, something that is once written in the fundamental law and never changes. It is not, it is a very dynamic concept. It has its own constitutional core. As the French would say, it has its own noyau dur, meaning that it has something that is always present, whether it is written or isn't. It is present in our political culture, constitutional culture, political tendencies, etc. But also what I wanted to say regarding Yugoslavia is the fact that the constitutional identity was reshaped several times. It was a very dynamic, in our experience, it was a very dynamic concept. It was shaped from the fact that we were once part of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, that once we had one part of our constitutional identity was strong communism, then Yugoslavism, then internal Yugoslavism, then socialism, then a social state. And afterwards, the constitutional identity again, I would say, evolved towards a democratic transition that is heavily influenced by the process of Europeanization. It's always difficult for me to pronounce Europeanization, as well as internationalization. So sorry if I make mistakes, but but it's kind of, those words are very important in my analysis, but it's very difficult to pronounce. Once again, sorry. So also, what is maybe common, not 100% common, but what is common between Central Eastern European countries and the countries of the Western Balkans is this concept of transition from communism to true democratization and democratic entities, independent states gaining independency. That is something that we have in common. We have in common a lot of experiences in the 80s and the 90s, but what Republic of Serbia has, unfortunately, is this concept of delayed transition. This delayed transition is the 10 years delays of everything that Central Eastern and Southeastern countries already experienced and went through. And while I was exploring doing my research for my thesis, I actually wrote an article with my Estonian colleagues. So we wanted to compare the constitutional identity evolution of a country that was once part of SSSR and once a country that was part of Yugoslavia. And even though we had some similarities, we had a lot of differences, and one of those differences, of course, that the late transition. Another difference is, of course, and I will just talk about it. Please tell me if I'm going way, past my time. Do not be afraid. Sometimes I go, because when you're doing your research and you're doing your thesis, you all understand that sometimes you go into too much details. So something that is very, very, I would say, specific to the region of the Western Balkans is that we were a very conflict-prone region. And we were very much influenced by those conflicts. And one of the French philosophers, Jean-Michel Gossiot, said that something that characterizes Western Balkans is, of course, that some identity issues were actually built and rebuilt in those conflicts. And sometimes, even today, the national identity issues and constitutional identity issues are brought again in the spotlight just because of the territorial issues and identity and conflict issues. One of the main things for Serbia, and we're all very well aware of it, especially we who live and work in Serbia, is the question of territorial integrity that still pertains in our constitution, even though that in the international sphere is quite different. That is, of course, the question of Kosovo. So meaning the autonomy or autonomy of Kosovo is still present in our constitution, is still present in our constitutional history very strongly, is still present in our, I would say, rationale of the political surroundings that still exist in Serbia. But if we look at it in comparison to the international sphere, we are not, I would say, we have somewhat different pictures. But I'll go back to that. So, when it comes to the Republic of Serbia, as I already told you, we went through several constitutional transitions, and fast forward, we came to the 2000s to the democratic transition. We brought the constitution that is still in force, that is the 2006 constitution. That constitution, to be honest, was brought in haste. Why? Just because there was a unilateral secession announced of the Kosovo in order to become an independent republic. So what we did, we actually sped up the first procedure. It was really, I would say it was brought up in speed, and we underlined in several parts how Kosovo and Metohija, not only in preamble, because you said that the preamble is a very important part when you are trying to interpret and determine the constitutional identity of one country. So Kosovo was not only present in the preamble of the constitution, but also present in several articles all the way through our constitution of 2006. This was brought again because Montenegro was also having its unilateral secession in 2006. So, as I already told you, the identity issues come on the surface, especially in the Western Balkans when we're dissolving. So these solutions sometimes brings a lot of identity and territorial integrity questions, and also the questions of sovereignty, as you already, several of you mentioned, and I'm really thankful that I had the opportunity to hear about it, because that is something that I also wanted to reflect upon. When we talk about sovereignty, and we talk about sovereignty of the Republic of Serbia, our own constitutional perception differs of the constitutional conception of the Republic of Serbia by the European Union, unfortunately. Then I come to the phase of the European integration process. So, while involving the democratic transition, we also went into the into EU integration process. With the EU integration process, we became very much aware how the external factors, very important political factors, actually could determine and be very actively involved in our constitutional processes, starting from the constitutional amendments, going through all the constitutional reports that were brought and are still brought by the European Commission and Venice Commission. You are all aware of the work of the Venice Commission in each of your countries. With us, those two actors, one on the side of the Council of Europe and the other on the side of the European Union, are the most active and important players and important actors in the whole constitutional process of the Republic of Serbia, taking the example of the latest constitutional amendments that were brought in 2022. One of the most important arguments, because of course we had constitutional debates, should we change the constitution? One and two. First one was we need it for the EU integration. We need to change our constitution in order to adapt and to go further on into the process of EU integration. The second one is we must not I would say, disappoint our external actors that are involved, meaning that if the Venice Commission gave us the green light, we should introduce the constitutional amendments. So that is also one of the specificities, delayed specificities, of the Republic of Serbia constitutional identity. This omnipresence of external actors and external influences in our constitutional evolution and the adaptation of our constitution to the European integration process. Then I come back to the issue of Kosovo. I'm not going into politics, don't worry, because people tend to do that. I will just come and explain a few things that are very difficult in order to, I would say, have an advanced path towards the European Union while respecting our own constitutional core. This means that if you take into account that you have 35 chapters in the in the European integration process. I don't know if Central Eastern European countries had chapters while they were negotiating, but Croatia did, Bulgaria did, Romania did. The 35th chapter is called Other Questions, meaning in the 35th chapter you discuss everything that is left meaning the transitional deadlines, everything you need to resolve plus. But in our case, the 35th chapter is actually the chapter regarding our constitutional core, meaning if we have as a part of our territory the Republic of Kosovo or we don't have. So something that was very easily technically adopted in the methodology of European integration for us, for the Republic of Serbia, becomes a very tense, not only political, but constitutional issue. So in order to go forward and to have our progress in the European integration, we need to resolve all the chapters, meaning chapter 35. What the European Commission says, in order to be the front runner, as they like to say, in the European integration process, and I used to work for the EU delegation, so I know this nice narrative and language that the European Commission uses, which is kind of a very subtle language. In order to be the front runner of the European integration process, you need to resolve the issue of Kosovo. So while I was wondering, and I could not find the answer in my thesis, maybe I will one day, because this is just the beginning of my work, is that conditio sine qua non? So if you want to go on, you need to resolve a question of your territorial integrity. And for example, because we are not, if we erase Kosovo from our constitution, are we erasing our constitutional identity? So is the constitutional identity reflects only in the constitutional text or in our constitutional reality, constitutional history, and of course the politics, everything that is in the rationale of a common person that lives in the Republic of Serbia. So that is something that is very difficult to grasp while you're doing the analysis of the constitutional identity in the Republic of Serbia. And thirdly, what we don't have, and you gave me a great intro for that, thank you, we don't have any activism of the Constitutional Court. So the Constitutional Court never ever mentioned the notion of constitutional identity. If we take into consideration that the constitutional identity is a concept, a complex concept, a multi-layer concept, is built par rapport, as the French would say, the other. So in comparison to the other, we have never measured ourselves with the other. So with the other meaning international community, European Union, or other country. Never so. Constitutional identity was never treated, for example, as it was in Poland, in Hungary, in Romania, even in Bulgaria with the recent cases, as you already know, never treated by our constitutional court. We only had once the opportunity to do that, and it was when we signed the Brussels Agreement. The Brussels Agreement was signed in 2013, and it was the political agreement, as the Constitutional Court defined it, between the Republic of Serbia on one side and the institutions in Pristina on the other, meaning not Kosovo, because we do not recognize Kosovo as an independent country, but the institutions in Pristina. And in that, and of course, the mediator was the European Union. The Constitutional Court had the opportunity to define our constitutional identity while it was discussing was this agreement in accordance with our constitution. It avoided to do so by, of course, defining it as a political agreement, as a political statement, and it avoided to define our constitutional identity. The only time when we were talking about constitutional identity, not constitutional identity, but implicitly mentioning something that could be the identity and the trait of our constitution was when we were defining the, I would say, the respect of European values, the rule of law, and something else that we could say that we all share, the common constitutional tradition. But if we talk about something that is part of our constitutional court never have we ever talked about it. And that's one of the biggest, I would say, lacune. I don't know the word, it's in Latin, like the something that we need to focus on in the near future. Why? Because we will come to the situation one day, imagine, if we enter the European Union, imagine that, and we are part of the European Union as a 30th, 32nd country of whatever organization exists. What is our constitutional identity? What do we have to say, okay, this is something where we cross the line and this is part of our sovereignty, one part of our constitutional trait, if we never discussed it, never had any kind of constitutional narrative that was supported by our constitutional court. So that is something that also Professor Vladan Petrov, who is on the other panel there, discussed on several times, and thank you. And I will, and I'm something that I actually wanted to underline in my thesis and hopefully in the article that I will write. So this is, I'll try to be short, and thank you so much. This is something that I just wanted to present to you, because here I came to learn about the European Union countries and the countries that are already having this, I would say, constitutional dialogue, whether it is successful or somewhat not, something that you already have. And this is something that we are missing, and I would say actively missing for years. And in order to do that, we need to, I would say, upgrade our constitutional stance and our constitutional narrative that we have to protect our own constitutional identity. So even though it's a dynamic category, it's something that also needs to be nurtured. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, well, I'll be in the back when we have a discussion. Thank you.